Welcome back to our channel, and today I'm going to transplant watermelons. As you can see, I have them in these containers and they're ready to be transplanted into this raised bed. And I would like to share with you 5 tips which will help you plant them successfully so that it will ensure successful growth and then successful harvest of sweet and juicy watermelons. So I would like to tell you what watermelons like. The first thing that watermelons like is warm temperatures, and in North Texas we have plenty of it. Even though in the last 2 months it's been rainy and a little bit cooler than normal, I think it's still plenty warm for them and they will grow well. So if you transplant your watermelons outside early and it's still cool outside, you will notice that they probably don't grow well, or they're growing slowly, or they look distressed. That means that the temperatures are still cool and you probably need to wait a little longer for the air to warm up a little bit. The second thing that watermelons like is a lot of space, and as you can tell in this raised bed, which is 4 by 8, we have plenty of space. We just recently harvested potatoes from this raised bed, and I think will be perfect for planting watermelons. So when you plant watermelons, make sure that you have plenty of space, and these 6 plants of watermelons are going to cover this whole raised bed, and then they're going to go beyond the raised bed and probably cover this whole area around it. It will probably be hard for us to walk here because it will all be covered in watermelons, but that's okay. That's what watermelons need, and I'm ready to give it to them. The third thing that watermelons like is they like to be planted straight into the ground. They don't like to be transplanted. Their roots don't like all that shock from transplanting. And actually, I planted some watermelons in the ground and they came up and they're doing okay. Like in this video, for example, you can see that I planted these watermelons straight into the ground and they're growing well. Even though because of cool and very wet and rainy weather, they've been struggling a little bit, but I think now that it's going to warm up, hopefully, they will do better. I know that some people plant watermelons in containers, and you can do that. If you decide to go that route, make sure that the container is large enough for the root system to grow and develop, because watermelons need their root system developed well in order for the vines to grow long and also produce that large fruit. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to plant these watermelons into this raised bed. I did that last year and they did really well. And if you plan on transplanting your watermelons from containers into the raised bed or garden or a larger container, make sure you do it quickly and don't let them stay in a container too long, because let me show you. You can see that the roots of these plants are starting to come out. That means that this container is getting to be too small for these plants, so they need to go into the ground as soon as possible. Tip number 4, watermelons are heavy feeders. To give our watermelon plants even more food and nutrition, what I did was I took all the green tops from our potatoes and put them back into the soil, and that was a week ago. And then I took all our kitchen scraps from the kitchen and also put them into the soil. And that is not going to hurt the plants. That's going to feed them as the potato tops and the kitchen scraps decompose in the soil. They're going to provide food and nutrition for the watermelon plants. It's not going to burn the roots at all. And to prepare your soil well, you can use animal manure, any kind of animal manure. It can be aged, it can be raw. In my opinion, animal manure is the best food and fertilizer for any kind of vegetable and plant. If you don't have any access to animal manure, you can simply use all-purpose fertilizer, and what you do is just sprinkle it all over your raised bed or the area where you plan to grow your watermelons. Just sprinkle it like that. And with a rake, gently work your fertilizer into the ground, into the soil. You don't need to mix it with the dirt too deeply. Just mix it lightly with the soil so that it would not be sitting right on top of the soil. And honestly, many times I just would sprinkle the fertilizer right on top of the soil without mixing it with the dirt, and it was just fine. It didn't hurt anything. The only thing that it attracted were flies. Other than that, it worked just perfect. All right. I also forgot to mention that in addition to all-purpose fertilizer, you can sprinkle bone meal right on top of the soil before you plant your watermelons or after you plant them, and just gently mix them into the soil with a rake, and that will help your watermelons produce good fruit. We actually had some chicken manure, and it was raw chicken manure, fresh from the chicken coop that we got at a farm where we buy eggs, and my husband helped me spread it on this raised bed. And yes, you can use fresh chicken manure when you plant your watermelons. If you plan to do that, just make sure that you spread it right on top of the soil, and don't mix that manure with the soil. Just leave it right on top, and when you water your plants, all the nutrients will go from the manure into the soil and into the roots. The only thing about raw manure is that it will attract flies, but it doesn't bother me, it doesn't bother us, and I've done this method many times in the past, and it works great. It doesn't burn the roots of the plants because you don't mix the manure with the soil, and so the roots of the plants, they don't touch the hot manure. It just stays on top, and as you water it, all the nutrients go down into the soil slowly. But if you have access to aged manure, any manure, chicken manure or horse manure or cow manure, you can mix it well with the soil, and it's not going to hurt the plants or its roots. And tip number 5, and the last one, is watermelons like a lot of water. Make sure you don't let them dry up. And I actually water my watermelon plants every day. If I don't get to water them every day, then I water them every other day. And I usually use rainwater for that because rainwater does wonders to vegetables and plants. Plants grow so well from it, so I try to save my rainwater for watermelons and for other important plants in our garden. And if you live in a hot climate where the soil dries up fast compared to the ground, you can spread a thick layer of mulch on top of the soil, and it will help the soil stay moist. Well, those are the 5 tips that will help you plant and grow and hopefully harvest your watermelons successfully. And now let's go ahead and start planting our transplants. And while we do that, I'm going to share with you another tip that will help you grow watermelons well. And so to provide even more nutrients for our plants, I'm going to actually put some of this compost on the bottom of the hole. And you can see that I have here some apple peels and watermelon rinds, and I have a tea bag here, a lime, and I also have leftovers from chipotle that we didn't finish and that kind of got old. So instead of throwing it away, I'm going to put it all into the ground. But I'm going to save some of it for the other transplants also. We have an eggshell here, so you can crush it in the soil. As you can see, these are raw kitchen scraps that I'm using. So now I'm going to simply cover them with the soil. I'll leave them like that on the bottom of the hole. And I'm going to take my transplants and put them on top like that. And try to put them a little deeper. That way your little seedlings will have more support. Just like that. Okay. And so the other thing, I'm going to put additional chicken manure. It's raw chicken manure around the seedlings, right on top of the soil. I'm not going to mix them with the soil so they would not burn the roots of the plants of our little baby seedlings. And that's it. And I'm not going to mulch it now because it's still kind of cool and a little wet right now. And I think we're supposed to have another round of rain for the next week. So I'm not going to put any mulch on top right now. But once it gets hotter, I'm going to put a thick layer of mulch on top to retain moisture. And when you put your kitchen scraps, raw kitchen scraps, right into the ground right before planting the watermelons, you don't need to worry that they will burn the roots. I've done it many times, and actually the plants they benefit from having all those kitchen scraps and all that raw compost in the ground, because the roots, they feed off of those kitchen scraps. Well, I hope this video was helpful to you. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate asking, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.